Good evening, everyone. My name is Simon Misiewicz from Optimise Accountants. Hope you're well and having a great evening so far. I'm just good evening, everyone. My name is. I need to just mute myself on my microphone, so apologies for that. Good evening to you all. It is a Monday. It is a dreary Monday, isn't it? Yet again, we've got forecasts of long showers in Nottingham. Not sure what the weather is like at your end. It'd be interesting to see if it is really that damn dreary as well in your neck of the woods. I've got some more water, again, for my personal trainer who might be watching in. I'm doing as I'm told. That's proof. So I'll be doing that more later on. I am going to be doing this in 3 sections as usual. Luckily enough for you watching, I'm going to change the format next week. So I've been doing some design work in terms of our articles and how the things I've been researching and looking into. Watching me against this wall isn't really that visual, I've noticed. So what I'm going to do from now on is start with this kind of look, but then I'm going to take you through some of the actual pictorial images of the articles I'm writing, and then I'm going to pick up some of the quotes for you as well and talk around those quotes for you. So next week will be a bit more interesting from a visual perspective. So hopefully we can get that done. And like I say, when you want to watch back on it, it's easy to navigate through this video as well. So let's go through what we're talking about tonight. So as usual, we will be breaking into 3 sections. First section is in the news. So I'll be going through all the tabloids and news paper articles that I've been reading about buy-to-let property investing and indeed buy-to-let property tax as well. I'll then go into the aspect of client frequently asked questions and see what our clients have been asking about in the last week. Some interesting questions, and I'm going to be sharing with you the solutions we provided to them, and indeed how that might be relevant to you guys listening to me tonight as well. And don't forget, I will be doing Q&A for you as well listening in. So if you do have any questions, make sure that you feel free to jump those questions into the comments box below the video. If you're on your handheld device, a little bit more tricky, I understand. But if you're looking from a laptop or desktop, then you can easily type in your questions and I'll be sure to answer those questions at some point in time. So I'm just going to have a look to see if anyone's saying hi. So just say hi if you can see Mez, or if you can, I'm just going to type in hi everyone. Hopefully you can see this, and then that gives you that encouragement to tap along and say hello to me as well. And let me know what the weather is like, because here it's pretty glum, I have to say. It's not particularly great. So unfortunately, we have got that to tolerate. Let's get into it then. So in the news, what's been said and what's been talked about. So the first thing I will go into is the Times. Interesting enough, there was about Hamptons International estate agent saying that there is slowing house prices in the market, and the market itself is quite stifled, whether it's because of Brexit or no one's got any money, or indeed the government's got it completely wrong and not that many people want to buy homes anyway. So what's happened? Well, sure enough, the professional buy-to-let property investors who probably are working inside a limited company have been snapping those properties up, and the yields are better because with falling house prices, greater yields. So even though the 3% SDLT surcharge, in the long run, they are happy, not happy, but they will pay that 3% SDLT surcharge if they're getting better margins. And as I said in last week's session, TMW, or the Mortgage Works, as I cited last week, were giving rates of about 2.89%. I mean, crazy. That is fantastic rates, by the way, and you wouldn't get those kind of rates inside your own name on some of the mortgages. But I've been told by other mortgage companies now that you can get sub 2% in your own name for buy-to-lets. So that's incredible. So that's a positive. So, you know, the last 2 weeks I've been saying how positive news are being drifting into the tabloids, and that's pretty much true of a lot of them. Letting agents today, though, cited about Savills was doing a report on the buy-to-let market, and they were saying that in the last 3 years, since the stamp duty and land tax changes came into effect, which is just timely, this is what I've just said, that they've had 120,000 mortgages redeemed. Now, what that doesn't say is how many mortgages, buy-to-let mortgages, have been replaced. They just say these mortgages have been redeemed. So yes, that's true, and in terms of the mortgages, but actually the flip side to all of this is the fact that you know, that 120,000 might have been replaced by 90, 100,000 buy-to-let investors that are snapping up these properties. They mention nothing like that. So it was a bit one-sided, if I'm honest, in terms of that argument to say that landlords, property investors in the UK are quieting down or becoming less. That isn't been echoed by a number of the tabloids that I'm reading or listening into of late. Apart from the Motley Fool, I've noticed that the Motley Fool is quite, let's say that it's anti-property investing at the minute. A lot of what they're saying is that buy-to-let investors will lose money because they're decreasing price increases. Well, yes, but in the other side to that, if you're looking for a good deal, as the letting agents today and the Times has shown, that people are buying properties. So seeing the price being, you know, going downwards and trend in terms of pricing, the price of the property, yes, it could be seen as negative, but then glass half full, right? So you should be looking at it from a positive angle to say, well, what if I want to buy more properties? And the Motley Fool is always saying that, well, we would rather invest it in shares. Well, let's be honest, shares can go down as well as up as well. The difference is if shares go plummeting down, then you don't have any capital valuation at all. They could just go pop and then the valuation's gone altogether. So, you know, there's a flip side to all of it, but I've noticed that the Motley Fool does hamper on about how buy-to-let property investing isn't the way forward. And that's fine, they've got their opinion, and I've got mine, and then you've got yours. But it's about taking a balanced view, and I think it's some of what they're writing is countered really in terms of, well, whatever negative they say about prices going down, I've got a counter argument say it's positive really, because you can buy better deals. And they talked about tax changes hitting you. Yes, that's true. For the amateur landlords, which I feel that they're probably more aiming at, I would agree that that's a challenge to them because Section 24, but the more professional landlords are now using limited companies and holding companies. So the tax rate of those next year would be 17%. So really, you've got to look at the pros and the cons when you're reading this material. It's easy to be sucked into the negativity, but I always say, well, what is the positive in everything that we're talking about? By association is another one that says, you know, it is a good future for buy-to-let property investing. All you need to do really is do better due diligence, find the right property in the right location, use a limited company if you're going to be a serial property investor as opposed to a landlord with just 1 or 2 properties, which please note, I'm going to come back to that comment about 1 or 2 properties. I'm the accidental landlord. But they also cite in terms of getting a good mortgage as well. Combining that, so the right property with the right mortgage inside a limited company, they feel that the buy-to-let property investing still has a good solid track record. And I would agree with it. That's what we're seeing a lot of our clients getting involved in now, in as much as they are saying that the whole industry is going to go towards more of a professional approach in terms of how we invest. Now, mortgage solutions, just to give it a bit more of a balance for you, I guess, they said that landlords should not be rushing into a limited company. And I would agree with that, by the way. Having a limited company has its a lot of positives, don't get me wrong, as long as you're looking to invest in that in the long term. From my perspective, if you've got a limited company because you're a high rate taxpayer, you're an employed person, for instance, then it makes sense, you know, that you should have a limited company, but not if you're going to give up your job in 1 or 2 years. You should have just kept the properties in your own name and then just suck up this Section 24 for a couple of years and then have good rates in your own personal name again. And interesting enough, Mortgage Solutions was pretty much saying similar kind of things I've been saying for a long time, is that people have been rushing into buying a limited company structure, and I don't necessarily think that they've done the right due diligence over the long, I think 5 years or more planning. They've gone into, right, okay, what's happening in the next year or two, let's jump into it. And I think that's sometimes the wrong thing. I think people just need to look at the long-term plan and say, well, what is my lifestyle? What am I going to do for earnings? All those kind of things do vary, and therefore you need to take a bit more of a balanced view. So I thought that was great insight to the way Mortgage Solutions works. They also cited the fact that most people still only have 1 or 2 properties. That would be an interesting statistic, because I feel that landlords that have got 1 or 2 properties will be wiped out at some point in the future, not them as individuals. It's not an assassination. And all I'm suggesting here, got to be careful with what you have to say on these YouTube channels, Simon. I know, but this is not an assassination. This is purely me saying that the amateur landlords, I think that's a bit of a derogatory term, but it's pretty much widespread on the tabloids at the minute, that they will be replaced by the professional landlord. And those landlords will then be inside a limited company, and they will be building their portfolio. And a lot of people are saying, even in the tabloids I've been reading, there is a professionalism coming about in terms of property investing. But I thought the Mortgage Solutions did write a good piece on that. I thought it was really interesting and worth having a look at. Residential landlord, another article on the website, talks about the popular areas of investing in property. So maybe get a pen and paper ready for this one, because here are the top tips that they talked about in terms of buying properties. The first one being Bristol. They did say that Bristol isn't London. It doesn't have that much of an appeal compared to the capital, but Bristol does have a vibrant and young kind of mix of people. So maybe going into Bristol, maybe buying some properties down there and getting a good long-term rent from there. And they said it was probably one of the best market areas to look into. The other areas to look at is Newport. Another place is Nottingham, where I'm from. So please stay away from Nottingham, though. Not a very good town, and leave those investments to me. Okay. Then you got Plymouth, you got Cambridge, you got Portsmouth and Bournemouth. Interesting enough, when you think about Portsmouth, Bournemouth, it's quite south, and then Bristol, and you got Cambridge as well, all quite close together, really, in terms of buying property. So it's, again, very southern based, I would say, in terms of property investing, but good areas for you to look at. If you're looking at new areas to invest in inside property, then it's worth having a look at those areas. The Property Wire talks about the fact that the mortgages, there was a cool down all the way through this year in terms of mortgage applications for buy-to-let property investors, whether they're in their own name or in a company. They're also citing that cooling off is stopped. It's pretty much in April now. There's quite a lot of buy-to-let mortgages. I think they're saying 5,100 buy-to-let purchases completed in April 2019, which is the same as last year. So that's an interesting insight. I think that maybe we're not seeing that much of a tailing off as we probably thought we was going to do. And I think it's back to any type of business that there is always a scaremongering. The press is the best at this, aren't they? In terms of saying, oh, it's the worst, you've got to get out, but then they never tell you the alternatives in terms of where to invest your money wisely. But they want to sell their newspapers, they need to sell their online presence. So, showing how negative they can really be and depressing you. If they sold Prozac for a prescription basis, maybe they should think of that as a business. I don't know. But, the Property Wire was pretty much saying the statistics for new mortgages on buy-to-lets are the same as last year. So we're not seeing too much of a tailing off. And actually now in April, we're pretty much getting back. A couple of other press releases I've seen is that they're saying that the more professional landlord or property investor, I always think that when I talk about, is it landlord or is it property investor? And I always think, Well, landlord feels like it's the person who wants to give up, landlord. It doesn't, it just feels quite old wording. But property investor is, for my mindset anyway, it always feels like as though they're an investor and therefore not passive and want to get rid of stuff. They want to invest. So I always have that kind of dichotomy in terms of, well, is it landlord? And I think landlord is the one that's going to be going out, and the property investors are the one that's going to be buying up their properties and making money inside a company. That's my perspective anyway. Another article release from Bridging and Commercial, really interesting, talks about the fall of the rates, but they've also seen, again, they've cited Hamptons International as well, saying that investors spent 5.2 billion less on buy-to-let property purchases in the first half of 2018 as they had done in the same period of 2015. And that, again, that's a drop of 30%. So yes, it's a significant drop, but we anticipated that from the 2015. But it doesn't mean for me that there is no growth area for buy-to-let property investing. It's just that it's had its day in terms of amateur landlords. Now that we're moving to a more of a professional outfit, I think we're not going to see the curling. I don't think you're going to see that drop-off rate continue going forwards. I think we're seeing the slide happening in the last 2 years. I think the amateur landlords will be, again, I use that word amateur, but you will see those landlords disappearing with 1 or 2 properties. The accidental landlords and the professional landlords, I feel, will be buying up those properties, and we're seeing that as we go through already. Interesting enough, Leicester Property Insight, they also, which is another publication on the web, and they talked about greater degree of professionalism in the marketplace. And interesting enough, for you guys listening to me today, tonight even, where are you? Are you a landlord that's passive and wanting to remove yourself from property investing, or are you a property investor that is looking to save money whilst building wealth in property? And maybe just type that in, I am a landlord, don't need to worry about the rest of the thing, or I'm a property investor. Property investor, proactive, let's go, don't care about the budget changes, we'll make it happen. The landlord, off we go. So which one are you? Are you the landlord or are you the property investor? Please type that in the comments box below, and I'll just be interested to see who is listening in to me tonight. And again, just to recap, Leicester Property Insight, again, use the phrase accidental landlord, and they're saying the ones with smaller properties, maybe 1 or 2 properties that's in their own name, they're the mostly affected by all these tax changes. But they also cite the fact that the more professional property investor are better prepared and willing to cope with change. And I kind of think that's true, because if you are not willing to change or adapt, you will die like the dinosaur. And I think that's just the way it is, or you will leave the industry and complain about it bitterly. Interesting enough, Paragon reported a significant increase in the number of landlords with large portfolios applying to buy-to-lets in the first half of 2019, which is echoing back on everything we talked about. Yes, the amateur landlord, I've said it again, I'm so sorry. The landlord is leaving, the property investor is investing. And I think that's pretty much where we've got to. So some interesting insights this week. And like I say, next week, it'll be a bit more visual. So I'll be putting those onto my PowerPoint, and I'll be talking in the corner, and I'll be putting some phraseology into my thoughts as well. But I thought this week was really interesting, very positive. From reading the literature, again, this is now a 3-strike in terms of positive reading, in terms of buy-to-let property investing going forward. I think the whole media has probably had enough of writing about depressing negatives, and starting now to look at the more of a, well, the dust is settled, what's next? And I'm sure that they know that buy-to-let property investors, the serious ones, are not giving up after all. Which is great to see, it's people do need a place to live. I've always said this, as much as the government wants to say, people want to buy their own homes. No, they don't. Not everyone wants to buy their own home, and you know, it just frustrates me when I hear the leaders of the Conservatives, well, leaders. Then you got the Labour Party. Then you got Corbyn, leader. Anyway, so in terms of the government and saying what they expected to happen, it's just people buying properties. Well, it really hasn't happened, has it? And you could blame Brexit, but actually the house prices on certain levels are moving, and property investors are still buying. So how's things worked? You could carry on taxing landlords, but you know what? I think all you'll do in this country is destroy the mortgage market altogether. Because if people don't want to buy houses, you're not going to force them to change. And if they don't have a place to rent, then homelessness. And then what are you going to do then, government, to sort that out? I guess you have never planned that. You can tell my interest in government, and I don't feel that the leadership of this country is that great as it. Let's be quite frank about that. So as usual, I do my property guts on my government rants from time to time. I will apologise for that. So let's just go on to, yeah, so good. I'm glad that the people listening into tonight are saying that they are property investors. So that's perfect. Jan Minty, hello Jan, nice to see you. She said that Wales house prices are starting to rise. The ripple effect on the last London price increase is beginning to reach us. I think that's true. I think other areas outside of London will start to see a market price increase because people want to move out of London. They are finding it more expensive, especially investors. They will not want to pay the London prices given the SDLT charge. So that's not a surprise at all. All right, let's talk about the client FAQ now. So we'll talk about clients. So what we do every week is that clients will book in questions and tax calls with our lead accountants. They could do that at their convenience, and then they'll get their specific questions answered. And what I do every week, I will look into the generics of those questions and then try and share some of those insights with you tonight and every other week in terms of what you might want to do. And there is the interest, the sway of questions is pretty much around property investing inside a limited company or property development, which has got VAT consequences. So it's a real kind of interest. We don't get that many questions, and I'm not surprised in many ways, of people that want to exit the industry. We have seen people that have left our services because they've disposed of properties. And in my view, that's crazy because they'll end up paying more capital gains tax. We haven't had that many questions about CGT, and yet they've just disposed of them. And I think it's a reactionary kind of way to be. They've just disposed of their properties and probably paid the heck out of their capital gains tax liability when they could have just phased it or done something a bit more savvy. So I do think people are a bit reactionary sometimes. Zig Ziglar had a great quote, actually. When something happens, you've got two ways of reacting to your behavior. The first one is reacting, and the other one is responding. And the people that react may not be acting on good discipline, on good areas of focus, logic behind it. So they're the reactionaries, and they're going to get it all wrong. And I do think that accidental landlords are going to be the ones that go through that pain. But then you've got people that respond, and I think that's the property investor that say, well, okay, we know about these tax changes, but how do we carry on doing this? But we've got to work with the new world of taxation. And I think that's the kind of calls that we expect to see. And that's followed really, because a lot of the questions we're getting is, how do I take money outside of a limited company? And I think the best way to look at this is imagine that you have no other form of income in your personal name and you've just got this limited company. Then we believe that your wage structure should be something like £8,628. Around about that mark. And the reason for that is because anything above that would be subject to employers and employees' national insurance, which is a lot more tax than you need to actually pay. So it wouldn't go above 8,628, even though your personal allowance would be 12,500 in this tax year. don't do that because of this national insurance charge. But what you do instead is that you take the 8628 wages, and then you take about 3,874 dividends. So I'm just typing something in. And that takes you back to your personal allowance of 12,500. Okay, so you are taking a mix between wages and dividends, but then you've got this other side to it of £2,000 worth of additional tax-free wages as well. £2,000 of additional tax-free dividends that you could take out of your company to come back to 14,500. Yeah, which is, you've guessed it, is more than your personal allowance. If you are interested about limited companies and should you use one, and how much money to take out of the limited company, holding companies, etc., I've got a suite of videos each week now for the next 4 or 5 weeks, every Thursday at 7 p.m. And I'll be releasing that to you. So the first week is, should you use a limited company? Then it's moving on to how to extract money. Then I talk about holding companies. Then I talk about IHT and various other things as well. So some good videos coming out your way in the next few weeks on a Thursday evening. So make sure you stay tuned for that. There are other things that your limited company can do. So you can extract more than what I've just talked about, wages and dividends. Your company can make contributions to your pension, and that would be a charge to your company and therefore reduce the corporation tax. And we've all got to retire at some stage, and a pension pot that you can invest in via your limited company would be something that you should all think about doing. There's also the key person insurance. So if you popped your clogs, for instance, then your company can pay out to replace you and to make sure your business can sustain itself. So if I died, for instance, then the company would have to get a replacement person to do what I do. That could take some time, and your company would have an insurance payout for that. You can have periodic checks on this. A client was just sent me an email just before this call saying, can I get a well person check done? And the answer is yes. Anyone above 40 ought to be having maybe an annual or biannual health check to make sure that your vessel, this thing, your body, is in good working order. And having a private GP to do a thorough check over is no bad thing at all. You do pay it. I mean, I pay £500 or something like that, but my limited company can pay for it. So why not? I'd rather know I'm okay. I could go to the well person check with the NHS, but is it as quick? Is it as timely? Is it as convenient? The answer is no, no, no. Not saying the NHS is bad, by the way. We are, accountants and tax advisors for medics as well. So I'm not dissing the NHS at all. They're doing a great job with the resources that they have at hand. But if you are like me and time is money, then going private sometimes is a better solution. Your company can also make £150 towards your staff due. So that's £150 per annum per person. So how many employees you've got, it can pay for a staff due. And that can come out the company. Again, it's not a benefit in kind to you as an individual. And you've also got £50 vouchers, which you can give up to your directors and your employees. Those £50 vouchers can't be cash redeemable, but you could have, and again, I've got another video coming out in 2 weeks to describe this better on a Thursday. But these vouchers basically are John Lewis or Waitrose, for instance. Your company would pay these £50 vouchers. It would give you the voucher, not the money, and then it doesn't become a tax benefit in kind to you as an individual. Interesting enough, you can't go above £300 as a director in a full year because it will be treated as benefit in kind. So make sure that you keep to the £300 limit in any given year. We talk about limited companies structures as well. So a lot of people are talking now about doing developments with other people. So you might go to a networking event, you may do a course, and you get talking to a couple of people around your tables, and you think, well, we're in the same location, we like the same kind of thing, let's get our heads together. And that's not a bad thing. Working with joint ventures partners is not a bad thing at all. I would say it's a good thing. The reason for it is being a property investor can be quite isolating. You've got yourself, you've got your laptop, and you might attend a few networking events, but that's quite a social thing. But when it comes to real business stuff, you may be kind of feeling that you've got no one to bounce ideas off. And that's why people use joint venture relationships really effectively. But let's talk about back to, if you do work with joint ventures, what structures could you use? And we always say that there's two ways of working with joint venture partners. The first one is to have your limited company. And if you're having a deal on a particular property, then you have a contract between your limited company and they're over there. And you talk about this property. So you just have a contract to say, we are talking about this particular property, and you have a contract together. So company ABC Limited and Mr. Z would have a contract to say about this property. We're going to split the capital and split the profits inside this limited company. Now, there are pros and cons to that, and you need to speak to your solicitor about which one would work for you. The other side to it, which is more costly in my opinion, is that you would have another SPV, special purpose vehicle, which is no more than a limited company in all honesty. So what would happen is that you would have joint venture one and you would have a limited company. I do again in about 3 weeks time on a Thursday. I've got a whole video about holding companies. So make sure you tune into that. Yes, why not? So why don't you tune into that later on? But in the meantime, let's just talk about in the genre. You've got this holding company here, and you may have joint venture companies dotted around. So you, instead of having, I'll give you an example actually. Let's imagine you have 3 joint venture partners, and each one of those joint venture partners in an SPV, limited company, separate ones, each generate £100,000 worth of profit. That's nice, right? £100,000 profit. You divide that by 2 because you've got 50% share in each of these companies. Now you've got £150,000 that has gone up in your name because you have invested personally into those individual limited companies. And that's a bad thing, because ultimately what's happened now is that that £150,000 may be charged on you at personal income tax rates for those dividends, which £150,000 you're getting into the tune of 38.1% dividend tax, which is crazy. Even worse, if you didn't actually want that money at all to for your lifestyle, you're happy to reinvest it. So what we're advising our clients is to use ABC shares within a limited company. You've got a holding company to suck all the profit, your share of the profits, up to this holding company, and then splurge it into a limited company 4, if you like. And the reason for that is a great benefit, because if you're taking dividends from the individual companies 1, 2, and 3 at 150,000 to your holding company, there are no tax for you to worry about. So it's a great way of using tax-efficient tax structures for you, but also for your joint venture partners as well. There are some complexities and things that you need to think about in that regard. And how many of you talk about joint ventures? Have you got any joint ventures going on now? And indeed, are you structured in the way I've just described? So you've got a limited company between you. And if you've got 2 or 3 joint venture partners, have you now got a tax nightmare that you probably weren't aware of? Or have you gone with the holding company structure? Feel free to type those into the comments box below, just to let me know what you've done with your joint ventures, or indeed, have you just got a contract in place instead? It'd be really interesting to see your thoughts on this. And if there's any questions that you've got around joint ventures at this point in time, feel free to type that in as well. And I will be sure to answer that live tonight before you go. The other one that's coming up is VAT. Quite a lot of VAT questions coming up. And this is around taking commercial properties and then converting it into homes. A couple of things that's been interesting around this. So you're taking an office, which you can get permitted development on, and then you convert it to a house, which you then can sell. That's the scenario we're talking about tonight. So this is whereby you've got a commercial property, You're converting it to a home for the first time that it's ever been a home, and you're selling it on. Why is this really interesting? Well, the first one is that the SDLT on the purchase is on non-residential rates. So you've decreased the amount of residential rates that you're going to be charged. Very, very interesting indeed. And then you've got the flip side to it, which is then the conversion of converting it from a commercial building into a residential. Because it's a conversion of that type, then the VAT rate can be dropped from 20% down to 5%. So you could say 15% VAT on certain aspects of the refurbishment. And then because it's a zero rated item, you're selling that property on to another person, it comes a zero rated item for VAT purposes as well, means that you can claim back even the 5% VAT items that you've been charged. So there's a huge amount of benefit of using those kind of conversions, and we're seeing a lot more people doing that. And I even talked about that in our workshop in Nottingham a couple of weeks ago, where I took an example of a building. We went through the whole process and then compared that to if you just bought a residential home instead and then tried to sell it on, and what the taxes implications of each were. Amazing contrast, and we went into detail about it. And I'm quite keen to do another property tax workshop in London this time around, so we can get a lot more buzz of people in the session. But yeah, a lot to consider, to be fair. So if you are thinking about doing that, have a think about that. The other side to it was VAT rate 5%. A lot more people are looking at properties that have been boarded up. People are looking to convert commercial to residential, which I've just described, and some people are thinking about changing the number of dwellings. So if you've got a single let dwelling into a HMO, then that's a change of number of dwellings. And the reason that's interesting, and for each one of those scenarios I've just described, is the VAT rate again falls from 20% to 5% on the direct materials and labour to do the conversion. So 15% tax saving, that's why people are looking at this kind of area. We're seeing a lot more increase of interest, funny enough, as I keep promoting it, as I keep describing. You need to get onto this, because there are plenty of shops and offices around that are empty, and the local authority may be delighted that you're going to be converting it to a residential property. Whether you keep it to rent or whether you sell it, but ultimately you might be able to save some VAT at the same time. Some things that you do need to bear in mind if you are going to take this approach, though, is that tradespeople must buy and fit the material. So you can't buy the materials at 20% VAT and claim it back. That's not going to happen. The reason is because rental income is VAT exempt, so you cannot claim back. And that's why that you need a VAT registered tradesperson, because they would claim back their 20% VAT and then they would charge you at 5%. So a good way of that's the process you need to take for you to take advantage of this. A couple of the things that you need to be aware of is that you cannot claim back the 5% that they have charged you, by the way. Back to my point earlier, it is VAT exempt in terms of rent. So you can't claim back that VAT unless you're selling the property on for the first time and it becomes a zero rated item. And any errors, builders are unlikely, if they've charged you at 20% and then you go bounding back, say, hey, yeah, I've found a way to reduce it from 20% to 5%. Would you please re-invoice me? They're not going to do it. The reason for it is builders are very, very skeptical of anything like this unless they've been told by the accountants. Their accountants probably not that savvy in terms of VAT law. Let's be fair, they have to just do income tax typically. They don't have to get involved in VAT that much. So they may not be helpful. And as a result, you're probably just going to get someone saying no to you all the time. So if mistakes been made, they've charged you 20%, kiss it goodbye, learn for the future. And that's pretty much what I would say on that point. So that pretty much brings me to the close of those kind of questions, which is now an interesting slide. Let's have a look at the questions that you have been set. So make sure that you do type in your questions and I will kind of get back to you on those. So William UK, you are very welcome, William UK. I'm delighted that I could be doing these Q&A sessions for you. And if you could do any questions, then feel free to type those in. Let's have a look. Property investors. May I ask one question? Oh, there you are. So William UK has asked me a question. That's good. I am planning to refinance my residential property to buy to-let property under a limited company. Can I treat this deposit as a loan expense? Some way to deduct the mortgage expense? Well, that's an interesting one, William UK. First thing, let's talk about you financing your residential property. Now I've got this the phrase HS340, which is qualifying loans. Basically, what would happen is that you have got, let's say that you've raised £100,000 out of your main resident property. You've got this £100,000, you've moved it to your limited company, so it now can buy buy-to-let property investments. The £100,000 would incur indeed the mortgage interest costs. And you can say, well, look, I'm doing this HS340 qualifying loan, and all that's going to happen is that the limited company is going to pay off that loan for me in terms of interest on just the £100,000, not the rest of your mortgage, incidentally, just £100,000. And it would be allowed to be offset against your limited company income as well. So that's yes, the answer to that. Can you offset the interest charge in your personal property because you've invested it? The answer is yes, you can. But it also leaves us with the other bit of £100,000 that you've raised in your own home and put it into your limited company. Now, that £100,000 is a loan to the company, and you could take that back out of the company anytime you want, provided it's got the money to do it. So it's a debt, it's not an income. You're not going to be taxed on the money that you're taking from the limited company to pay you back on that loan. So good question. To be honest, it's quite a common question that we get right now. So I'm not surprised that that's come about in recent times. I'm just going to have a look, see if there's any other questions, because YouTube does give me this issue sometimes where I'm looking for questions and then 3 pop up at the same time, which I know can't be happening. So let's just have a look. There is nothing else coming through. So guys, I'm going to probably stay here for a couple more minutes. I'm going to talk you through what I've got coming up. And then if you've got any questions, feel free to type those in. And then if not, I will then say my good evenings to you. And then you could do whatever you want to do for the rest of your evening. So the couple of things is, don't forget that next Monday, we're still doing YouTube Live. We will have a new format, a better format, still the same time. So it's still 7 p.m. on a Monday evening, but we'll have a different format where I will show you the newspaper articles and I will highlight the particular quotes that from those press items. And then I'll give you my kind of views on those items as well. So it helps you if you wanted to go a bit more detailed in reading it further, then you can do so. Right now, this format doesn't work in that way. You're just watching me, which is fine. But then, if you did want to know more, it's difficult to do that. So I'm going to give you the kind of references for you to look at, and then next week along. And it's a bit more visual, so it's not just this boring kind of wall behind me. You'll be able to see the newspaper articles as well. The client FAQ, I'll do very similar as well, as much as I can. It's not as easy to do that, but I would do my best throughout that. Thursdays, don't forget, we've also got the buy-to-let property tax videos being launched every 7 p.m. And the next few weeks, as I said before, will be about limited companies. So that'll be an interesting one for you to look at. And last but not least, we will be doing another property investing workshop in London in September. And it probably will be the second week in September on a Saturday that we'll be doing that. Tickets will go on sale for about £500, but it's lunch, it's everything you could imagine. It's me, it'll be Louise, there'll be a full day, plus all your drinks and nibbles as well throughout the day, plus lunch. it's going to be a great session where I'll be talking about SDLT, VAT, income tax, tax structures, using companies for wealth, as well as reducing tax in the short term. So that's pretty much it. William, you guys have got quite a few questions here. So my husband works as a managing property. Can we do bids between two companies? You can do business between two companies. You'd have to, it's got to be an arm's length transaction to do a limited company such as that. But yes, if you are legitimately providing services from one company to another, yes, you can charge services, but there could be a VAT consequence of you doing so. So he's managing director, but also sole trader, provider, property manager. Okay, so if you're talking about doing work between your company and you as an individual, that's probably not so good of an idea because it's not truly arm's length. So if you're kind of saying, well, I do bits and therefore I'm charging my company to get earnings, you probably need to get some tax advice about that. It's not going to be the most tax efficient structure for you to use, to be honest. So hopefully that's kind of giving you some answers to that one, UK. But it's good to see you. It's the first time I've seen you on here. But thanks very much for that question. And I will be back on next Monday. Like I say, there's not many other questions, so I'm going to happy to leave you on this. Oh, sorry, Louise. Well, you're on it tonight, William. You asked a question saying, under limited company, property prices can be depreciated. There are new laws that are possibly being depreciated, but it's a bit more I'm going to go into tonight. But to be honest, the depreciation on buildings isn't as favorable as you probably would have thought. So it's not going to save you a ton of cash, if I'm honest. It's not like these states. I know in the States they give you a good depreciation rate, so about 20%. All right, it's not as high, but you know, when you're doing your 1040 US tax return, they are favorable. They're very much entrepreneurial. When we're doing our SA 100s in the UK, we don't get the allowances as the US citizens. But that's a session for another day. But thank you ever so much for watching. I'm not going to go on any further. And I look forward to seeing you on Thursday virtually through my video uploads, but I'll also see you next week here, Monday night video as well. Thank you, and see you again soon.